Charles, first thing I wanted to ask, when did you know you wanted to become an accountant, or why did you become an accountant?
Well, after I left the military, I found that the business world did not value the skills I had picked up in the Marine Corps. And among those was I was a computer programmer and systems engineer trained by
Mhm.
IBM. But they thought since it was military that it didn't apply to the business world. Um, because if they've not been in the military, they have no idea what your training is or can be and so on. So I went to college, got my degree, started for BBA, got my BBA and my MBA. And in the coursework, I came across accounting as part of a business degree and found I enjoyed it. I liked it. It was fun. I like tax. My MBA is basically a master's in tax, but I wanted it structured as an MBA for the resume because a master's in tax is limiting where an MBA is not.
Mhm.
So I enjoyed that and went to work in the in corporate world for 15 years before I hung out my own shingle.
Got it. Awesome. Appreciate the brief background there. A quick follow on that. So you said during your studies of accounting, you became really interested in tax. Can you elaborate on that? Because I think some of the listeners will think, oh, accounting, corporate accounting is somewhat exciting for those that think accounting is exciting, but who here loves tax? If you could touch upon that.
Well, tax is an extremely complex body of law that can be interpreted numerous ways, and therefore it allows a lot of creativity. The the first chapter of my first accounting book, the first paragraph, the first sentence says, accounting is an art. It's the very first sentence in my very first accounting book.
Mhm.
And it is. And tax is even more so. So it's something that it's fascinating to me. I spent many years in the tax area. I'm a U.S. tax court practitioner, which allows me to represent my tax clients in U.S. tax court, even though I'm not an attorney.
Mhm.
So it's something I've made a career out of. Now I specialize mostly in employment tax, which is, again, a fascinating area. And I enjoy taking on the IRS. It's
As
a
we all do.
it's a game, and that's how you have to view it. It's like my attorney told me about another instance. It's like playing high stakes poker with somebody else's money. Okay, I didn't like it because it was my money when he said that, but the point being, it is a game, and it's one you can win, and it's one that I enjoy fighting for my clients and winning with the service, which we normally do. I have yet to lose a tax court case. Uh,
Awesome.
I've not always prevailed in audits and appeals areas, but I've done far more success than I have failure. So
Mhm.
it's fun, and my clients, when we win, they love it too. So you know,
Awesome. I'm sure. Well, I hope after that answer, there's a tax attorney working for the IRS or the government out there that's just plotting, plotting to take you on one day. So I guess hopefully you'll
uh,
stay undefeated.
come on, feel free.
Awesome. There's anyone out there. We heard Charles' challenge, but really appreciate that. Another follow-up question, just regarding taxes. So obviously, as you mentioned earlier, taxes can be really convoluted, and you also mentioned that it's more of an art and always constantly changing depending on the political environment, who's in office, and whatnot. So, what's your best recommendation for small businesses to stay ahead of the tax code, and also for just accountants working in tax to stay ahead of these as well, and also figure out all the seemingly evolving loopholes?
Well, several things. First of all, for those who are in business, hire a professional that knows your business. Uh, there's not every accountant specializes in every area. There's areas I don't touch. Okay.
Mhm.
If you come to me with a question on international transfer pricing and the tax implications, I'm going to send you down to Price Waterhouse. Okay. I'm not going to do it. It would
Mhm.
be malpractice for me to do it. But small business tax, employment tax, income tax, those I specialize in. So I can help my clients. But if they're in some strange business, they need somebody who is familiar with that. I'm familiar
Mhm.
with a lot of businesses. We consult with a lot of clients, and tax is tax and payroll is payroll. But there are specialty things that you need to be aware of. And so you want an accountant that's aware of those. For those in the business, well, you got to read the trades. You got to take seminars, webinars. As a CPA, you're required to do 40 hours of CPE. Most of mine is always in tax
Mhm.
because that's where, I work. So uh, the people in the profession know what they need to do to keep their confidence up, and they need to do it. And if you hire an accountant who doesn't do it, then you need to find a new one.
Yeah, or a lawyer in that case.
Yeah, and you are right. The law changes constantly.
Mhm.
It changes from every time Congress meets, every time there's a new administration, every time control of one of the houses of Congress things change, and they
Mhm.
have for years. I remember I took a course in college in '75, I guess,
Mhm.
on gift and estate taxes, and in '76 the entire law changed.
Wow.
My class was a waste of time.
It's really
So
encouraging for the
uh,
college students
it
out there.
yeah it happens, and changes are constant. For
Mhm.
instance, classification of independent contractors is in huge flux at the moment.
Mhm.
The original law had been updated by the Trump administration, but before it went into effect, the Biden administration came in and canceled what the Trump administration had done and
Mhm.
has issued a new proposed rule, which will probably go into effect late this year or early next year, that will have a major impact on classifying independent contractors.
Mhm.
And if you don't keep up on that stuff, now our clients, we communicate with them all the time, send out updates, letters, newsletters, emails, and so on, uh, to keep them from stepping in holes that they're not aware of.
Mhm. Got it. Okay. Awesome. Interesting. Really appreciate the insight around that. Another question I had was something you just recently touched upon. You said for certain areas of tax law or certain kind of tax services, you'd recommend clients to go to Price Waterhouse or maybe one of the bigger accounting firms. How would you say that a business knows whether to go for a more regional or kind of a smaller accounting firm versus one of these big four players out there?
Well, first of all, the big four was the big eight when I was in school, uh, are expensive,
Yep.
and they will push services that you may or may not need. For small
Or,
businesses, those in the under 50, local CPAs are fine,
Mhm.
provided they're knowledgeable and sharp and on top of their game. But there's poor CPAs, just like there's poor lawyers, poor doctors, poor marketing people, poor plumbers. Okay,
Mhm.
so you have to be aware of who you're hiring. Get your friends' recommendations, but keep on top of it and make sure that they're answering your questions in an intelligible manner and giving you advice
Mhm.
that makes sense, and they're keeping you up to speed on things. One of the problems that you'll get with lawyers and sometimes with accountants is they'll want to tell you how to run your business.
Definitely.
Lawyers, accountants, insurance agents, bankers are advisors.
Mhm.
They don't run your business. Don't let them tell you how to run your business. You're
Mhm.
the expert on your business. They're not. They may be the expert on risk, on accounting procedures, on banking regulations, on insurance requirements, and use their knowledge. But don't let them tell you how to run your business. That's your decision, and it's your risk and your reward, not theirs.
Totally. And there's definitely a lot of consultants and probably investment bankers out there that are sweating beats listening to what you're saying. But kudos to a lot of the business owners. Obviously, if someone's going through a major transaction, want to go to a bank or wants to do some kind of market research, definitely maybe go to a consulting firm specializing in that. But I think there's a fine line that maybe business owners have to walk in realizing they're just advisors. They're not, running my business or operating my business for me.
Exactly. Use their advice, pay for it, get good advice. I mean, you can't know everything. As a small business person, as an entrepreneur, you wear all the hats and you're not an expert in all of them. You may be an expert in one or two of them, and that's great. And therefore, but on those areas that you're not, backstop yourself with experts.
Hmm.
You don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You need to hire the smartest person in the room.
Hmm. Definitely. Awesome. Real, that's definitely great advice for all the business owners out there. So hopefully they can stay operators, listen to the advisors, but keep on running their business. And really appreciate that. Another question I had, similar to what you said, a little going back to your background. You said you served in the military. Would love to know how you think your military experience really shaped really the man who you became, and also just what you did within your career.
Okay. I spent 4 years in the United States Marine Corps. I
Thank you,
joined
leadership.
at 17.
Hmm.
I spent 2 years overseas, including a combat tour in Vietnam. I was an NCO, a sergeant. You learn a lot of things in the military that you don't learn elsewhere. Discipline, order, mission, sense of mission. Basically, Marine Corps comes down to uh, mission, men, self as a leadership guideline. The mission, you accomplish the mission, whatever it takes. That's the
Hmm.
first thing you do. Then you take care of your men. Then you take care of yourself.
Hmm.
And this is something that a lot of business people don't see. You see a lot of them enriching themselves at the cost of their people or their clients or their business. And that is short sighted and foolish and is, is poor leadership, in my opinion. But I've
Hmm.
been a critic of American business management for the last 50 years. Because there's a lot of poor management out there. I've seen it up close and personal.
Yeah.
The worst boss I ever had, I learned a great deal from. I learned a whole bunch of things never to do.
Learn from everyone, you
So,
know?
but the military, you learn discipline, you learn self discipline. There are some problems with it. Military is very hierarchical, and that doesn't work in business. In the military, you're either superior to them or they're superior to you. Period.
Hmm.
Everybody. It's a total ranking. Nobody's equal. You're either
Hmm.
superior or subordinate. That doesn't work
Okay.
in business.
Like that.
That was something I had to unlearn with my wife's help. She was
Hmm.
a great people person. So it can be unlearned. It can be learned and unlearned. But the leadership skills that you learn in the military can very much transfer to business and should.
Got it. Okay. Appreciate that. Another thing that I wanted to touch upon that you just mentioned was that from your experience, you see that a lot of business owners may be short sighted when evidently really doing, obviously hustling, but doing one thing right at a time and ultimately building upon that tends to be more sustainable. That being said, and with that view, kind of, I want to say, quote unquote, known, why do you think a lot of business owners still remain really short sighted and kind of try to grab the dollar right away instead of making a really quality product or building a great team?
I think a lot of it's ego.
Hmm.
They've started the business. They own the business. They know the business. And they think they know everything.
Hmm.
And they don't. And it's obvious that they don't to everybody but them. They make decisions based on personal whim rather than rational analysis because they think they know better.
Hmm.
So a lot of the failure comes down to ego. I have often said, and I've kind of sketched out some of it. I'm going to write a book called "Park Your Ego at the Door."
It's a good
And to be
title.
successful in business, you have to do that. You
Hmm.
can't let your ego run the business because it will trip you up.
That's definitely a good point. I know. Well, everyone, we all probably struggle with ego, but I'm sure some of us, can be more mature than others. But for those of us, I'm sure there are a lot of people listening too that internally and don't really share think that they do struggle with ego. Is there any specific or tangible advice you recommend for people to, really keep their ego in check or park their ego at the door? Or totally intending that pun.
Well, yeah, learn how to park your ego at the door. Learn to listen to other people. Learn to synthesize all the facts and arguments and knowledge that you can get. Understand that you're not the best at everything. Your
Hmm.
mother told you that you'll find somebody better at it than you are. Well, she's right. There
Yep.
are people that are better, stronger, smarter, faster, sharper than you are. Utilize them. You don't
Hmm.
have to be everything. You're not the end all be all. Uh, Take advice, get information, study, uh, improve your skills, backstop your weak spots with people who are experts. As an entrepreneur, you wear all the hats to start with, but as soon as you can, take off those that you're weakest at and put them on somebody's head that's strong at it. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
don't hire your clones of yourself. Hire people who are diverse with their skills and their knowledge and their abilities,
Mm-hmm.
and use those to make your organization stronger. If it all depends on you, it's going to fail. I
Mm-hmm.
promise you, because you can't do it all yourself.
Got it.
I have a whole staff doing payroll. I could not do the payrolls by myself. If they walk out, the business collapses. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If I piss them off or fire them, the business collapses. Okay.
Yep.
So I need those people. They need
Mm-hmm.
me because I provide the business and the salary and so on. So it's a relationship. Your staff, your people are the most important thing you have. You can get new clients, but finding good people is really tough. Not that you shouldn't take care of your clients, don't misunderstand me. But our mission is to deliver perfect payroll on time every time. That's the first thing we're concerned with. The next thing
Mm-hmm.
I'm concerned with is my people. I want them taken care of. I want them happy. I want them content. I want them working hard. I want them interested in the business.
Mm-hmm.
When I give this business up, it's going to them, and they know it. It's not going to my children, or it's not going to be sold to a major competitor. It's going to the employees. So they're interested in the business and making it work.
It's a good way too. There's probably a lot of newer startup founders that just plan on building their company for a few years and then just liquidating through some kind of investment bank, since obviously a bank will be very motivated to extract their fee. But it's really great to see and kind of refreshing to see that point of view, in the sense that you're basically saying when it's all said and done, the business goes to them in whatever way, shape, or form, because you're really putting your money where your mouth is, literally and figuratively. So I think definitely very commendable.
But they made the business.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, without them, the business wouldn't be what it is. So why shouldn't they benefit from it? That's how I view it. That's how I think it should work. That's me. It's not everybody, and I understand. Building up and selling it off and retiring on a small fortune. A lot of people have done that, and that's fine. And that's their business, and that's the way they do it. So be it. It's not the way I am.
No, totally. I think even the way you're doing it, even though you're not selling it off, it may be a little more sustainable. And if you value the business and kind of the people in it more than you value the money, then that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Awesome. So another question I had kind of regarding that, and to kind of summarize what you just said, would you say it's not learning how to do everything on your own, even though, as you said, entrepreneurs wear multiple hats, but learning to work with everyone and how every different person can really contribute, and then that's ultimately how people will grow, as opposed to just trying to juggle a million balls at a time?
Oh, absolutely. You cannot do it all yourself. You
Mm-hmm.
have to rely on other people to grow the business. Sure, there are some consultants that only work for themselves and don't have any employees and can make a good living,
Mm-hmm.
and that's fine. And there's artists and there's other people that don't need a staff. But if you're going to grow a business, you can't do it all yourself. So you have to have people. You have to rely on them. You have to have other experts, because you can't do it all. One of the biggest mistakes I made in business
Mm-hmm.
was I thought I could market, and we grew, okay, and we grew okay. And then we finally got big enough that I didn't have time for marketing because I had other things that I had to do. So I hired a marketing manager. And it took me about 2 weeks to realize I can't market my way out of a paperback. So she came in and revolutionized our marketing, and has done much, much better. When she left, I hired another marketing manager. I would not go back to running it myself on a bet, because I'm not very good at it. I thought I was, but I'm not. That was one of the weaknesses that I didn't realize I had. Some of the others I realized, but that one, I thought I was better than I was.
Yeah, it's really interesting you brought that up, because I actually spoke with a big marketing executive yesterday, and he mentioned how he originally wanted to work in finance, but then didn't really work out, and then got interested in marketing. Thought it was more helpful towards people and helpful towards businesses, and said how he worked with individuals who were entrepreneurs who said thought they could market and wear a million hats at a time. And when he really broke it down for them and how to sell, they kind of echoed your sentiment just now in the sense that, wow, we really don't know jack about marketing. We should really try to hire someone who knows what they're talking about. So definitely agree with
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, to move on to another point, back to the tax background, not to get back to the more boring stuff, but the tax background. So you say you work as a tax practitioner, and for those that don't know, and feel free to correct me as I'm certainly no tax expert, but a tax practitioner is one who can practice in a court of law without an official tax license. So we'd love to know if you could elaborate on a little more about your work as a tax practitioner and kind of the kind of work that you've done as well.
Yeah. Okay. I am a United States tax court practitioner. That allows me to practice in tax court and represent clients and be counsel without being a state licensed attorney. There's a couple of hundred of us in the U.S. It's relatively rare. You have to take an exam at the U.S. tax court that they give in person once every 2 years. And you have to pass substantive tax. You have to know tax court procedure, evidence. So you have to become trained in legal evidence and in legal ethics. So all those things that a lawyer learns about ethics, you have to learn those as well and pass a test to do that. Less than 10% of the people taking the test pass it normally, and they only give it every 2 years. So there's not many of us, and I don't know of another one in the payroll industry. Frankly, I'm not aware of any. So that makes us a little unique in the industry, is that we can bring that expertise to bear, and I do on a regular basis. Normally, I'll file a petition for a client because a tax court petition stops all collection action. So if you've gotten to the point where you have a good case, but the time is running out because you've gotten your 90-day letter, and if you don't do something within that 90 days, you lose. So a tax court petition stops that 90 days. It tolls the time. And what happens is when you file a petition with tax court, the first thing it does is it goes to docketed appeals. And you get a very, very sharp appeals officer and or lawyer, IRS lawyer, who look at the case and discuss it with you. And in many cases, that's all it takes because you've got a good case, which is why you filed the petition. And they go, okay, I need this proof, and then we're fine. And that's what normally happens, is you get somebody that really looks at it rather than a low-level examiner or a first-level supervisor at the IRS who's got some pressure to collect taxes, not settle cases. Okay? And so when you get it to docketed appeals, they have pressure to get them off the docket.
Mm-hmm.
So if they can settle it, they're perfectly happy to settle it. And then on top of that, most 95% of all U.S. tax court cases are settled pre-court.
Interesting.
So even if you don't have a 100% case, you're very likely to get an offer for a reduced amount. Mm-hmm. So, that you weren't getting before. So you can get for a $60 filing fee. Many times you can get a much better deal than you were getting from the regular IRS contingent.
Got it. It's very interesting to hear. I actually got a speeding ticket one time and ended up going to court with the thought that the police officer wouldn't show up, but he did show up. So I guess that time it wasn't as fruitful for me, but it's good to hear that for folks who do get into tax issues and ultimately kind of end up having to go to tax court to really get a practitioner or tax attorney. And, from your statistic, 95%, it sounds like it's definitely worth their while. So really insightful stuff there. Awesome. So moving on to another area that you've discussed before, which is kind of working with small businesses, doing payroll for them. Before I get into some of the specifics of your background and kind of what your company does, I would love to know, in your opinion, kind of what the biggest financial burdens are that small businesses face today.
Well, the biggest financial burdens first of all, is capital.
Mm-hmm.
My rule of thumb when I'm talking to a potential startup is for them to go through and use their imagination to think of every possible expense they're going to have. And when they get done with an exhaustive spreadsheet and business plan of everything they need and what capital they need, I tell them at that point to double it. And it might be enough. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because there'll always be things you can't possibly imagine or think of that are going to happen that are going to use up cash.
Mm-hmm.
And cash is king.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest thing. The next biggest thing is hiring the right people, finding and hiring and keeping the right staff. It's a
Mm-hmm.
chore. And if you're not good at hiring people, get with somebody that is.
Mm-hmm.
I was very lucky. My wife was a superb people person, and had been in hiring situations where she hired people for many years. So when we started the business, she was able to help me immensely in hiring the right people. Um, there was only once that I uh, hired somebody over her suggestion and almost immediately regretted it. She was right. So I quit doing that. Now that she's gone, it's much, much harder for me. But
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I do when I hire people now is everybody on staff interviews them.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody on staff has veto power.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody
Interesting.
doesn't like them for whatever reason, I don't hire them because there's going to be a culture problem.
So
I
very
don't need
interesting.
that.
No, for sure. I
So
think sure. A lot of times, interview processes can get certainly tedious and difficult, but I also think, especially for a small business, say that has under 50 employees, well, maybe not all 50, but at least a representative from every department to interview this individual, because I think culture is one of those things that people look at and think it's kind of a loaded word, but in reality is there has to be some kind of intangible vibe or cohesiveness within a business, because if there's one small rift, it only causes one crack to make the foundation fall. So definitely agree with everything you're saying.
it takes one jerk,
Hmm.
one malcontent to one rotten apple,
Hmm.
and it spoils the whole barrel. Okay, it's true. It's old saws and it's old aphorisms, but it's true. You need to be very careful, uh, and you need to be ready
Hmm.
if you make a hiring mistake to fire them.
So, hmm.
And firing people is no fun. Firing people is a very difficult thing to do. You're screwing with their life, and
Yep.
and I don't like to fire people. I haven't had to do it in years, uh, but there are times that you have to do it. You'll make a bad hire. You'll make a mistake. Things will change. I had a wonderful young man who was working on his CPA.
Hmm.
And this goes back to something I said earlier. And when he passed his exam, he thought he was God's gift to business. And he was telling clients how to run their business. And I counseled him and I counseled him and I counseled him that you can't do this. You're an advisor. You can't tell them how to run the business. They're the expert. He wouldn't listen. And I had to let him go. I hated to
Hmm.
do so, but he was upsetting my clients for no good reason. And we lost several clients over it because he wanted to tell them how to run their businesses because he was a CPA and he thought he knew better.
Hmm. Interesting. So it goes to
So
show, similar to what you said earlier, you can have all the talent in the world, be a super bright person, but you can't, not to quote your future book, but park your ego at the door. Ultimately, you can't be great in business. Definitely interesting to hear that. Another question I had regarding just another small business issue. So something you said before, the biggest issue that small businesses may face may be capital. Just out of curiosity, from your perspective, even though I know you have a tax background, would you think that small businesses rather grow through debt financing or equity financing, or is there more that needs to be kind of researched before deciding whether to go with either?
we financed internally. I was a successful, you know, executive before I started my business. So we had the capital. We borrowed some for equipment and so on. But other than that, it was bootstrap. I eschewed the thought of venture capital because I don't want people running my business. I want to run it. That's why I started it. So I'm not a believer in venture capital for small business. There are places where it's appropriate, but if you're kind of a control freak like I tend to be, venture capital is a great way to lose control. Debt financing can get very expensive. Equity financing, now you have partners that you're responsible to, that you have to answer to, that are going to ask questions that you don't want to answer, but you have to because they're part owners. So, and I no longer own the business entirely. Several of the employees have a piece of it now already. And that makes for some interesting conversations. But my right hand person, Deborah, has been with me for 20 some odd years. We're work spouses. We've worked together for so many years. She knew my wife very well. She's one of the few left that does, because Ruth had her stroke some 15 years ago and passed about 8 years ago. But equity has its own problems. So it's debt's a little easier, but you still have to. It's expensive. So you've got equity is less expensive but more intrusive. Debt's more expensive but less intrusive. The bankers like to dig into stuff, but I have yet to meet a banker that really understands financial statements, and I've met a bunch of bankers. They're bankers. They're not accountants. Right. Most of them have, these days, it's credit scores, and there's a credit analyst in the back that'll take the financial statement you give them, plug in the numbers into their computer, and score it up. That's. I remember one of the major bankers here in Dallas saying a number of years ago, after all the banking crises, that they still make loans to characters, but they don't make character loans. And he was sad that the world had changed to the point that you didn't loan money to a man based on his character, because in reality, his character is the only thing that guarantees repayment.
Definitely. I think very, very deep, and certainly wish more people saw it that way. I think a lot of times now, especially just investors or kind of bankers or a lot of these advisors may get caught up in the cloud and sometimes don't pay attention. It sounds more simple than it is, but really paying attention to the financials and cash being king. It's just to get on a small tangent. Another lifetime, I actually wanted to be a banker. So I know high level about what's going on, but definitely not to the extent that accountants may do. So it can definitely resonate with what you're saying.
One of my great sources of amusement is banking commercials on radio and TV. Because they're a joke. Bankers don't do what they say in the commercials. Definitely. The only thing they're interested in is loaning money and getting interest and fees, because half of banking revenue these days is fees. They're not interested in your business per se. They're not interested in you. They're not interested in your success. They're interested in loaning you as much money as they can and getting as much interest from you as they can and making sure it gets paid off in the end.
Yep.
If you think otherwise, you've got a surprise coming at some point.
Yep. What's the old banking saying? 363, borrow at 3, loan at 6, golf by 3. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah. Bankers are. And if you ever really need money, you're never going to get it from a banker. They only want to loan you money if you don't need it.
Yep. It's the ultimate oxymoron out there. But awesome. Really appreciate that. Another thing I wanted to ask, just regarding your background, I know you've written some books. Would love to know, can you discuss a little bit about the books you've written and how you think they may help business owners out there, and a little bit about your future?
Well, I've written, my fourth book is the Payroll book, which is a guide for small business and startups. That's the subtitle. And it's basically everything you need to know about payroll for a small business. It's not designed for the Fortune 500. It's
Mm-hmm.
designed for the under 50 crowd that doesn't have a payroll professional on staff.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes through all the things involved in taxes and deductions and income and entities, and then a lot of things that are related, such as handbooks and aliens and workers' comp and record keeping and how to deal with the IRS and how to deal with the government. So it's a guide. It's available on Amazon and uh, Barnes and Nobles and so on.
Mm-hmm.
I there was no good book out there I found for small businesses. I was consulting with them, and I'd get questions, and there was no place for them to go check it. So the nearest thing is the payroll source from the American Payroll Association, and it's $600. So I said, I'll write
Wow.
something. I'll just knock out a book. Well, 2 years later, finally, Wiley published it, and Wiley is a major publishing house and made it a much better book.
Mm-hmm.
They're superb people to deal with. If you need to publish a business book, I recommend talking to Wiley. The
Mm-hmm.
first three I self-published, but Wiley made it a much better book
Mm-hmm.
and helped with distribution and so on. So, but it's 30 years of wisdom distilled down to 95,000 words.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the book. And the previous one was The Little Black Book of the Beauty Business, which was basically the business side and the accounting and payroll side of the beauty business. My marketing manager was a esthetician by trade, so we went with that.
Mm-hmm.
The other two are much older and relatively out of date.
With the tax code. No, for sure. Well, if anyone's looking to start a business out there and wants to get on top of their payroll and doesn't want to pay $600 for a book, you can definitely find your book on Amazon, and I'm sure will be a
Well,
worthwhile
and
read.
Daniel, I'll do you one better for your listeners.
Sure.
If they will go to thepayrollbook.com and enter the discount code podcast, we will ship them a free book. No shipping, no handling, no nothing, free of charge, as long as supplies last. For your listeners.
Appreciate it. What was the website one more time?
Thepayrollbook.com. Discount code podcast.
Awesome. Really appreciate that, Charles. Even better, they don't have to pay $600 for a book. They can get one free and can stick it to the man even more. So really appreciate that.
And when they find that they still have questions, my phone number's in the book.
Got it. Awesome. Wow. Really appreciate you providing access, Charles. Way to give back and sticking to your word earlier, valuing the kind of business and the people over chasing the dollar right away. So definitely very commendable. Really appreciate that. And also, whoever's listening did not plan that beforehand. Charles is just a super generous guy, and definitely very thankful for that. But no, that's really awesome. Another thing that I want to touch upon, I know you mentioned earlier, and as we've been discussing, your payroll business. I'd love to know why you chose. I know you had some background in tax. Why you chose specifically kind of payroll as an area of business as opposed to something and sticking to broadly finance or broadly broadly accounting or kind of the subsections within those.
When I started the business, it was an accounting firm with a payroll sideline.
Mm-hmm.
And we found payroll was a good way to sell accounting. Well, over the years as we grew, I got tired of tax returns and accounting. And my partner wanted his own business. I'd taken on a partner over the years. And so I sold him the accounting practice and kept the payroll because I like the business to business aspect of payroll better than I like business to consumer. So the retail tax practice he took along with the corporate tax practice and the accounting, and I kept the payroll, and we've continued to grow that rapidly. We're a national firm. We're in all 50 states. So it's just I found I enjoyed the payroll business. I enjoy fighting the IRS with on payroll questions and employment taxes. And in 19, the IRS issued $13 billion in employment tax penalties. Billions of those were abated by people like me who know what they're doing. So anytime you get an employment tax penalty from the IRS, it's not cast in stone. It may well be a mistake on their part or something that you can fix on your part. So in dealing with the IRS, It's appeal, 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 appeal. Just keep appealing. It's a whole series of no's followed by a single yes. When you finally get one person to say, "Yeah, okay, we'll abate that," say thank you very much and go about your business.
Got it. No, that's a great way. I mean, similar to what you said earlier, it seems like there may be some L1 level employees reviewing all the text, all the questionable returns kind of cited by the computer, and people get that right away. And since they're not as familiar with the tax code, they may think that's written in stone. But it's really good you're encouraging folks to really take a look into that. And it sounds like a lot of those things can really be abated if someone's really double checking what's going on.
They can be, and you should fight them wherever possible. And if necessary, you end up going to tax court and you get a settlement offer. Okay.
Got it. Win-win, or kind of a win, or lose a little bit less. So it sounds like either or is a great benefit, but really appreciate that. So to touch upon or to summarize what you said earlier, you just found payroll was just a little more comfortable than taxes, because taxes you're kind of just keeping up with the code, whereas payroll you get to take on the IRS and probably delve much more deeper into businesses. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, it's a fun business. I enjoy it. I enjoy my customers. I enjoy my staff. It's just a fun business.
Awesome. Well, to get to the last few things I'm going to touch upon, I know you've been in the tax business for a number of years, published author, have your own company. The list goes on. I won't bore you with all the accolades. But from your perspective, with a lot of these advancements in AI and a lot of education evolving, we'd love to know where you think the future of accounting is going. Whether you think there may be more automation in the future, or there could be, not to ask a political question, but kind of innovative tax codes. Just would love to know what your outlook on the future of accounting is.
Oh, I've seen a lot of technical changes, technology changes over the last 30 years. I've seen a lot of law changes. I think you can expect change constantly going forward, both in technical aspects of how the work is done. Um, uh, I'm not a real fan of AI because artificial intelligence actually doesn't exist. They're expert systems that are programmed. I was a programmer. So there's still going to be the human aspect of it. Yeah, computers are going to get more information in them and are going to be able to spit out better answers. But accounting and tax is an art, and computers don't do art. So you're always going to have arguments. You're always going to have points of view. You're always going to have points to advocate for your client and make rational arguments. And these are things that are going to require experts that are knowledgeable and have the requisite experience. So the human aspect is never going to disappear, as far as I'm concerned. But be that, I remember old comptometers and 10 keys and so on. All that's gone. The mechanical side of it is much, much faster. We do a great deal more business with less people today than we did 15 years ago because of technological advances. So you have to keep on top of technology. You have to keep on top of the changes in the law, but you have to be an expert. And for those who don't know, 75% of all U.S. revenue, federal revenue, flows through payroll. So when Congress wants to change revenue, they change payroll. It's just that simple.
Got it. No, really, really interesting fascination there. So it sounds like payroll is much more involved in kind of the fund or big percentage of the revenue that they get. So I'm sure that's a really interesting statistic there. But yeah, no, overall, Charles, really, really appreciate your time. Last thing I wanted to ask, you have any parting thoughts for the folks, favorite foods, accounting jokes, any general things you want to share?
A couple of things. For the
Sure.
entrepreneurs out there, there's never a traffic jam on the extra mile. Go the extra mile for your clients, go the extra mile for your staff, because your competitors won't, and you'll stand out thereby.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is one I stole from Bill Gates. People will overestimate what they can accomplish in a year and underestimate what they can accomplish in a decade. It's a marathon. The first few years of being an entrepreneur, you don't have work-life balance. It's all work, I promise you. It gets better over time, but it takes time. I've been at it now for over 30 years, uh, and we're successful. But it didn't
Mhm.
happen year one, I promise you.
Got it. So to really stick through the marathon, fail fast, keep going, and no traffic jams in the future, or I guess faster traffic jams in the future if we can look at it that way. But awesome, Charles. Thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. Appreciate the book offering later, and we'll definitely mention that. And yeah, look forward to staying in touch.
My pleasure, Daniel.
Awesome. Hope you have a great day, Charles. Take it easy.